important directory structures of my Docker. Okay, I talked about, okay, these containers are going to live inside the system. Where exactly these containers are living? Where exactly these images are getting stored? Okay, so let me take the other session, and I may need some sudo privilege to access the directories. Sudo assume the default directory where the Docker will be installed is var lib docker. This is the default directory where the Dockers will be installed. Inside that, you will see multiple folders. Let me talk about the containers folders first. So inside the containers, you would see the information about all the running containers and the exited containers. Currently, we don't have any containers. That's why you don't see anything. Let me run a hello world container again, and then I will show you. Hold. Okay. Now, if I do ls, you can see if I do a docker ps-a, so I can see a container in the existed state, and this is the complete hash value of the container. You can see that it is displaying only some specific number of digits, but this is the actual complete hash value of the container. So if I go inside this, I will be able to see the folder structures. What is the config? What is the host name? Okay, what is the resolve.conf checkpoints? If I'm having any mounts, and the container logs are getting stored here, the json.log, all this information will be inside this directory. Okay, so this is what it's getting stored in the containers directory. And the next area I want to talk about here is called the images. We are having images, right? But images are not stored as files. You can see in the overlay, they are stored as a DB. Okay. So there is an image DB. Inside that you can see that. And images are stored as a layers. We will talk about that when they come to the image history command. So there is a specific reason why these images are stored as a layers. Okay, it is going to give you some additional advantage by storing the images as layers. We will talk about that after writing the Docker file. This is on the images part. And next is called the volumes. So I talked about attaching a volume to a running container, right? So if I create any local volume, this is where the volume will be created. We'll see that example in the upcoming class, and I will, at the time, I will show you where the volume directory is created and how the data is stored inside it. Okay, this is on the volumes. Overlay as a concept is, if you have two identical things, if you want them to communicate with each other, that is where overlay comes in. They use this concept in the imaging also. So how to manage the image layers hash value in a unique way. That could be the concept around the overlay here. And next is, like, if you have any plugins installed, you can see them under the plugins, and runtimes, Docker runtimes, you can see under the runtimes, and network related configurations, or all the network related configurations are stored in the network directory. And there is one more concept called Docker Swarm. Okay, this is the Docker version of Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is developed by Google. So Docker also provides a similar orchestration platform called Docker Swarm. So if you have multiple Docker hosts hosting these containers, if you want to use a Swan network and then manage them, you can do it. But compared to Kubernetes, this is not that much effective as Kubernetes. So there I have seen companies which is using only Docker Swan and Docker, but it is not that much as effective and powerful as Kubernetes. So that is what you see in the Swan thing. And trust or the trust domains, I think so. And build kits is the area where build related utilities are getting stored there. Okay. So these are all the important directory structures in the Docker installation. And this is where, when you run more containers and if you keep more images, this directory can get filled up very faster. Okay. This is one important directory structure. And another important directory for Docker configuration is called etc Docker. So the default Docker installation will not have a file called daemon.json. Okay. So that means default configuration. If you want to modify the daemon properties, like for example, I wanted to use a specific registry, okay, or I want to whitelist some of the domains. So those kind of informations you will be writing it inside this location with a file name called daemon.json. By default, the daemon.json will not be available. If you want to write some custom configurations for your Docker daemon, this is where you will be coming and writing it. Okay. And another important file on the Docker perspective is called, not only Docker, OS perspective, varlog messages. So any Docker daemon related log files, if you want to see, if you are having some issue with the Docker daemon, it is not getting something, you are getting some error, that you can find it in the Docker, in the varlog messages. Okay. So if you want to enable debug on the daemon.json, there you can specify the debug level. And if you wanted to write a separate file, you can also configure that in the daemon.json, which is in the etc docker directory. So these are all the some of the important directories of a Docker host. Varlog messages. This is a default log file for a RPM based machines.